Hello, Rose.
Hi.
It's me and James so far.
Hi.
How are you? Awesome. We're waiting on Colin, but we were just kind of chatting about elementals a little bit because I'm still riddled with questions, and I think we always will be. But my first question, I'll totally ask you.
Okay,
Okay,
like I know, but I'm just saying, I'll try to answer your question, sir.
are we made of the same stuff elementals are? Is it all the same?
Well, I mean, your body, most of your body's water, you breathe in air. Hi,
Hello, how are you?
you eat food, and you have agni, A-G-N-I, agni inside of you, which is that fire.
I owe you $10 or $5. How much I owe you?
Oh, $10. Yeah.
So, yes, they're from the very beginning. They're in you. They're in you now. They're in us
Okay.
now.
But at what point is at what point?
I don't consider elementals demons.
Neither do I, but
No.
at what point is a conglomerate, thank you, of like elementals or whatever with direction?
You're directing them right now
Right, okay, so
because your physical body is composed
what
of.
comes first, a soul or elementals?
I don't know, but I think maybe I think a soul is a composite of things. I could be wrong, but like.
See, I don't want to trick, I feel like this would be all whole class here. But I have an example I think might help.
Okay.
I'll wait a second. I have an example that might clear it up. I might quantify. No, hi.
Blocked by a moving truck.
Yeah. I was blocked earlier by, I think it was a funeral procession, but it was all like lowriders and stuff.
That's good.
So
Makes it interesting.
it might not have been, I don't know what it was, but it was blocking everything for a while. At least it was fun cars.
Yeah.
Do you have any people on the Zoom today?
No, we just got Rose so far.
Hey, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
I have a question on chat.
Oh, yeah, I see it. She is wondering what happens when it takes over a being.
Well, it depends on what you mean by it.
I mean, are you referring to like an elementary? Elementaries? That kind of cusp?
She could be typing.
Why can't we?
Oh, it's not yet. How can we stop or recognize it? Like, you know what? I think maybe what she's saying is like what during the spiritualist was seen as a possession or something.
She's asking about demons and elementals.
How could that be? Yeah.
Okay, to get started, a basic thing, an elemental, and we'll get into it, we started discussing it last week about elementals and elementaries. An elementary is more what you might consider a demon. But every person that lives, unless you're an adept, is going to have an elementary aspect of them that will slowly or quickly fade out after you die.
Right.
You could think of elementals as anything that you have as a habit and your character. They're not all bad. There's good elementals and bad elementals. And it's our thinking that creates them one way or the other. A lot of people are confusing an elemental with, say, possession. And possession you could think of as being a elementary.
Yeah. Something
that is because of your nature, because of how you think, because of your tendencies, you become a little more passive or receptive to it. So and in the sense of the, seance where you brought it up, the other week. Those people were actively being passive. They were putting their stuff in a state, and it's the same thing as if you get hypnotized.
Mhm.
If you've ever been to see someone get hypnotized or how hypnotism works, people do it for various reasons. People do it to quit smoking or change an addiction. People do it because they have a fear of getting on a plane. So you go see a hypnotist and they tell you, oh, you're not going to be fearful of being in the plane and you have to go to a certain amount of sessions. But by doing that, you're giving the person that is the hypnotizer kind of a gateway into your brain, into your mind. And at the same time, you're limiting your own safety switch to block that from happening. So I'm not saying hypnotism is always bad, but you're opening yourself up to the nature of the person that's a hypnotizer. So they might be trying to help you stop a bad habit, but at the same time, you're getting the magnetism from them that was going to carry their mind current, not all of it. And some of it's going to be subconscious, even to the hypnotizer, not the person getting hypnotized.
So, so if, say one had not necessarily made a mistake, but at some point had opened up themselves, or maybe, even through methods of like drug use or psychology and things like that, it opened up themselves. And like or through practice that might be considered reckless or, necromancy and things, had opened themselves up unwittingly. How do you think one would recognize that creeping, and would there be, what are maybe some methods to stop it if it had already started?
Well, the recognizing would be somewhat difficult because, there's a pretty common folk saying, the devil made me do it. Well, maybe that was an elementary. Maybe that was your own nature just acting on its own bad impulses.
Right.
And that's the thing. It's hard, an adept could tell, but for ourselves, how are you going to know the difference? And the way you prevent from that, HPB has said, first off, you don't want to be passive at anything. You want to start developing a strong willpower to do what you want to do, not even what your body wants to do. We all know you shouldn't be smoking. By now, everyone knows you shouldn't smoke. You're going to go outside and see people smoking. And some of those people, they have close relatives that died from cancer. But, it's okay, I'm going to do it. Or you want to change your diet, all that stuff, you have to exercise your willpower. And sometimes people exercise it to a point where they just create a good habit, but it's still a habit. So as long as you recognize, okay, I'm gonna get up a half hour early before I go to work just to exercise, or I'm gonna get up in the first thing in the morning for 10 minutes, a half hour, I'm gonna meditate. So you start setting a new cycle. And that's a way to strengthen your willpower. And once you start doing that, then all the elementals that you've already built by, I'm gonna sleep 15 minutes after my alarm clock goes off, I can get up and get ready to go to work. Or, I'm gonna have my coffee and I wanna check the internet news before I start my exercise. All that stuff is gonna start creeping in every time you try to do it until you create a good habit.
Sure.
Let's get started for today.
Yeah.
I want to go over, before we even get into some of these questions that this is the conversations on occultism, were a conversation between William Q. Judge and HPB, and he would ask her questions like we're doing now, and she would explain it. And so he wrote some of those out and published them as articles in various magazines, and then it's a pamphlet that we made here at the lodge. It's also in the collected writings of William Q. Judge articles. But before we get into that, because Theosophy has a whole science behind occultism. And so to start looking at the questions, like this is an excellent question to get into that she's brought to start us off. Before looking at that, or before getting into a whole discussion about elementals, we need to know what the teaching is of her occult science. People have studied other things. People study Buddhism. People study the Hindu teaching. Some people have studied Kabbalah. They all have similar things, but hers is very specific and sometimes coincides and sometimes it's different. So before we get started, I'm going to read something out of the Voice of Silence. And the format, I'm going to read something out of the Voice of Silence that kind of explains as a start, like occult nature. And the Voice of the Silence is kind of a manual on meditation and states of consciousness when you start delving into occultism and self-study and trying to understand your own psychological processes. It's kind of like an owner's manual for a spiritual soul and a human mind. So I'm going to start, let's see where we're going to start here, because I'm going to start right at the beginning. So I'm not going to read all the way straight through. We're going to start at page 1 of the Voice of the Silence. And Tanya brought this up on our first class about cities or idis or powers. You have, there's certain occult powers, but there's also occult beings, entities that also have access to those same occult powers. So right at the beginning, fragment 1, it says, the Voice of the Silence. These instructions are for the ignorant, for those ignorant of the dangers of the lower id, or the lower powers. He who would hear the voice of nada, nothing, or silence, the soundless sound, and comprehend it, he has to learn the nature of dharana. And here she gives a footnote. Dharana is the intense and perfect concentration of the mind upon some one interior object, accompanied by complete abstraction from everything pertaining to the external universe or world of the senses. Having become indifferent to the objects of perception, the pupil must seek out the Raja of the senses, the thought producer, who awakens illusion. The mind is the great slayer of the real. Let the disciple slay the slayer. For when to himself his form appears unreal, as do on waking all the forms he sees in dreams, when he has ceased to hear the many, he may discern the one, the inner sound which kills the outer. Then only, not till then, shall he forsake the region of Asa, the false, to come into the realm of Sat, the true. Before the soul can see, the harmony within must be attained, and the fleshly eyes be rendered blind to all illusion. Before the soul can hear, the image, man, has to become as deaf to roarings as to whispers, to cries of bellowing elephants, as to the silvering buzzing of the golden firefly. Before the soul can comprehend and may remember, she must unto the silent speaker be united, just as the form to which the clay is modeled is first united with the potter's mind. And then the soul will hear and will remember, and to the inner ear will speak the voice of the silence. And I'm going to skip a few pages and I'm going to go to page 6. This is in the voice, Chris, page 6. So now she's gonna talk about when you can quiet your mind and you're going into a state of meditation, what planes of consciousness and beings you're gonna come into, or what world of experience your consciousness and your inner senses are gonna experience. 3 halls, O weary pilgrim, lead to the end of toils. 3 halls, O conqueror of Mara, or illusion, will bring thee through 3 states, into the 4th, and thence unto the 7 worlds, the worlds of rest eternal. In the footnote, she says, the 3 states of consciousness are Jagrata, the waking, Shupna, the dreaming, and Shushupti, the deep sleep state. These 3 yogi conditions are said to lead to the 4th, or Turiya, that which is beyond dreamless state, the one above all, a state of high spiritual consciousness. Some mystics, some Oriental mystics, locate 7 planes of being, the 7 spiritual lokas, or worlds, within the body of Kalihansa, the swan out of time and space, convertible into the swan in time, when it becomes Brahma instead of Brahman. So let me go back. We ended with the worlds of rest eternal. If thou wouldst learn their names, then hearken and remember. The name of the first hall is ignorance, or avidya. It is the hall in which thou sawest the light, in which thou livest and shalt die. So our regular phenomenal world. The name of the hall, the second, is the hall of learning. In it thy soul will find the blossoms of life, but under every flower a serpent coiled, and that she says is the astral light, or the plane just beyond physical consciousness. And then she says the name of the 3rd hall is wisdom, beyond which stretch the shoreless waters of Akshara, the indestructible fount of omniscience. So here she's giving us an introduction first of the powers that we're trying to get aware of and not have them control us. And that's all internal powers, even before we start dealing with planes on the inner state from like the astral world or the Akashic world. We all have our own inner natures that we have to deal with. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is talking about. All those chapters in the Bhagavad Gita is really talking about the battle within our own selves to elevate our consciousness to a state of awareness where we're aware of our true nature, and we're in communion with other minds, but consciously. Because she said we're all connected. The problem is we're not connected consciously. So we might think that we have a particular desire, which we might have, and we might have cultivated it. But that desire might have come either from a previous life, which we had also cultivated, or it could be because of the surrounding environment that we're in, either where we grow up or where we gravitate to, who our friends are, what our influences are. So all that, she says, is going to come into play when you study occultism and what she means by occultism. And it goes into a whole wide field of everything that people have talked about: magic, black magic, talismans, cures, astrology, all that stuff is occultism. But she has a very methodical way of introducing it to you, so you don't delve in and open up centers in your body that you can't not then close up. But at the same time, she's giving you a warning, but she's saying eventually, everyone is gonna have to do this. We might do it a million years from now, or we might do it tomorrow. But humanity as a whole is going through this process of evolution, whether you want to or not, to a certain point. At some point, you might just plateau and you won't progress any further. The rest of humanity will pass the spot.
Rose has a question. Rose?
Thank you.
Oh, you just want me to read it? What about tarot cards? And do these halls have anything to do with emerald tablets relating to Thoth and Hermes? I'm not sure about, I mean, I know a little bit about Hermes, but what about emerald tablets?
I have no idea what that is. If they were physical tablets, it could have been teachings that Hermes left.
Sure.
You know, just a little side note, Hermes' real name was Hermes Trismegistus. So what does that mean? That means,
Trice Majesty.
yeah, he was conscious,
He's a,
he was conscious on these three planes of awareness. He was a physical person, either true or mystical. We're assuming true, but either way, he was a person that left certain information. And maybe that's what she's talking about, these tablets, but he had that nickname or that title because what he could do, they were aware that he was an adept that could experience on these planes and then bring it back. HPV says everybody, when you go into deep sleep, you're on the Akashic plane. You're not on the astral plane. You're on the Akashic plane, which is the spiritual plane of reality. Universal consciousness, meaning however an ant thinks in X, you have the ability to know and understand it. When an adept thinks in X, you have the ability to know and understand it. Because mind is one thing. We experience it individually, but it's all one thing. Whatever I think is accumulating to these planes of consciousness.
As above, so below, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, all my bad tendencies are creating a big storm cloud in the astral plane. And all my habits that I've been brought into this life to correct are in that plane and are gonna affect me personally on this plane till I work through them. But also, all the good that I've done through all the lifetimes and everybody else is in the Akashic plane. So if, you know, why is it important to know about these distinctions? It's important because you're gonna read in other things besides Theosophy, certain ideas, and some of them are gonna be accurate and some of them are gonna be way off the mark. So it'll give you a ruler or a way, a lens to view these statements, because she said through the Dark Ages, through the medieval times, what the adepts knew had to be hidden. But at the same time, part of it had to be let out somehow to the public. Otherwise, all this wisdom that humanity has collected is going to be lost. So when she's writing about Atlantean and what happened in Atlantean times, all that information might be in some books in some, you know, cryptic library that the Egyptians hid when Alexandria was supposedly burned, their library, but it's all in content in the astral plane. So sometimes a psychic, if they're a natural psychic and have a true desire to really help humanity and not to cash in by giving people bits of personal information, have them come in every week to pay their $100 to get another reading. If they're really trying to help, they can tap into that plane, the Akashic plane, to then give guidance or to help humanity in some way. And they might be able, they can tap into the astral plane. The thing is, HPV explained that when she was writing her books, she didn't have access to books that were in the Vatican, but at the same time, she had to give references. So people eventually that could check those references could check and say, hey, wait a minute, this lady's not a kook. She's actually talking about real stuff that the rest of the world doesn't know. So super intelligent, say, scholars that are within the Catholic Church, and they're going along with the Catholic teaching, they read this and they think, oh, it's, you know, it's just a bunch of bunk. Then they can go and look and say, well, wait a minute, she's giving a different interpretation. We have the books, but she's giving a different interpretation. A lot of what humanity has is studying commentaries of books that other people made commentaries on. And so at some point, the commentary is now a commentary on someone's commentary that made their own commentary on a commentary. And are you getting the real information, or are you getting a skewed understanding by some really deep student? And so that's kind of why she went through this, why she came with the secret doctrine, and why she started off with Isis Unveiled, was to talk about some of the stuff that happened and then give explanations of how it happened and what the rules are in that science. Because on this plane, she said, on this plane, science is really good at making discoveries on this plane. Where they get into problems is when they start making conjecture on other planes that they have no way of accessing and no instruments to read it, and then say, this is what's happening in there because we see it here. And she's like, you can't always know the cause of an effect by just studying causes. But if you get to the plane of the astral plane, you're going to see some of the causes that happen as effects here. And that's why, you know, you could go to a street corner psychic that might be able to tap into the astral plane and give you very accurate information about what's going on or what happened in the past 3 years or happened last week. But they're not the same as someone that can tap into the Akashic plane and give you the spiritual impetus and also the true information without it filtering and getting mixed up in the astral plane.
There are more questions.
There's a phrase for theosophy, but sometimes, you know, when a questioner asks, what is theosophy? Of course, you can, you know, speak about the etymology of the word and different things. There's a phrase that where he said that theosophy is the accumulated wisdom of the ages. And that, you know, in this psychics or spiritists won't give you any of that accumulated wisdom of the ages. Now, he goes on to explain how can this be accumulated wisdom of the ages? And he gives names, you know, of certain, you know, peoples, and he gives names of course, you know, some of us are familiar with rounds and races. So these go back to the endless beginning. It's like there's no beginning. So we're getting this information, at least we got it this time through Blavatsky from the masters in a legitimate way. And we can say it hasn't been that distorted too much, although it's been to a point, but the fact that we have the original writings, you know, we have the direct connection to what they are telling us, you know, how things really are. And of course, you know, in the words of the silence, he speaks of the darsanas, or the 6 schools. And if we look at the glossary, he said that some Hindu chelas say that occultism or theosophy is the 7th. And they say that because this is the study of theosophy is the synthesis of all those schools. You know, the Vedanta, the yoga, And so you can belong to any of those schools and then study theosophy or any religion. And when you study theosophy, you kind of begin to remove all these blinds. Blinds, of course, in your own mind, right?
Scan.
Yeah, and then you start seeing behind what is the true meaning of certain name or a phrase or a word, and that way you don't just stay with the outer aspect of something that been mistranslated, many times or misinterpreted, So we have the opportunity that we go direct to these teachings, and like you were saying earlier, you guys were talking about all of these writings that are out there, and you find in theosophy so much interest because it's not being like, you gotta be a saint in a way, there's no police over here to see how you behave, how you think, how do you interpret these things? It's really up to you. Nobody's gonna tell you, well, to a point that, this is wrong or this is right, but it we kind of help each other to guide ourselves to the correct interpretation of the writing.
And the other thing she said, it wasn't that someone had a vision and then they wrote it all down. It was a bunch of adepts for many lifetimes.
Right.
That checked the visions of other visionaries. And if it, in the same way as a scientist here, you make a discovery, you have to publish your results and how you got them. And then other scientists have to try and repeat your methods. And if they can't, they know it's not accurate. And she said the same thing. That's how they know the difference. And she said, you can obtain accurate information in the astrolight. It's just, you have to know how to read it. And she says, everything in the astrolight is reversed. So it's like trying to read a book with a mirror. So she says you see a number and it's 763, the real number is 367. And everything else that goes along with that. So you might get exact phrases out of a book, but it might not be in the same sequence. So that's the thing. She says there's a way to learn and you can extract information. But like in this Voice of the Silence reading, she said, under every flower, a serpent coiled. We know from everyday life that everything has two aspects. When they figure a cure for something, there's always a negative use for it. If you use it a certain amount, it's a cure. If you use it too much, it's an addiction or it'll kill you. We discovered gasoline, so we use it to get rid of horse manures. And now we have air pollution. So, you discover, they discovered dynamite. So now we can dig through a mountain and excavate easier and get through passes we couldn't get through. Yeah, but you can also blow people up and kill people. And she said that's everything, whether it's a cure or a poison, they're both. If you have something that's highly toxic, there's a way to use that to heal someone. Just as there's an elixir of life, it's also an elixir of death. And it's knowing what is going to cause it. It's not always, if you have poison and you use more, it's going to be more poisonous. Sometimes if you have a poison and you use less, it'll kill you instantly. And so she's saying there's laws to nature, and the science has discovered a lot of laws, and then there's laws to metaphysical nature. And then there's laws to hyperphysical nature or spiritual nature. And you can't operate in that world against those laws. You can only get so far as a black magician, then you can't advance any further, because at that point, it's like swimming up a waterfall. There's no way you're going to swim up a waterfall because you're going against the full force of nature. Now you can swim up current to a certain point, but at some point, the laws of nature are going to stop you from advancing because it's too detrimental to the whole universal plan. When Justin started 2 weeks ago, we discussed the three objects of the Theosophical movement. And to keep on with occultism, I want to start at the beginning where she talks about the three propositions of Theosophy. Because the three propositions, she's laying out the groundwork of the fabric of the cosmos before manifestation, during manifestation, and the process of it keeping repeating, where a whole system, a whole universe will disappear, another universe will appear, souls will appear, souls will disappear. She said it's a natural law, cosmic law, and it sounds kind of, okay, maybe a little dry, but it explains, it gives a groundwork to understand and explain why, as a human being with a certain amount of intelligence, you can enter and perform and remember and have consciousness in these states that of universal consciousness. Because if we don't have any connection to it, how are we gonna experience it? We can experience everything in our universe, she said, consciously. They're trying to build a spaceship to go to Mars. Consciously, you can go to Mars. But there's certain requirements to be able to do that. There's certain requirements to tap into the consciousness of the beings that Dion Chohans that helped create the universe, which were all part of that nature. So I'll start, I'm not going to read all of each one, but on page 14 of The Secret Doctrine, the first one, she says, page 14, and sometimes, you know, in a class, we would read the declaration, and then we would talk about the three fundamentals, just to get people, keep people familiar with even just basic ways to think about them and why it helps understanding some of these very deep metaphysical terms and circumstances that she's explaining, like mesmerism and hypnotism and spiritualism. So at the very top, she says, the secret doctrine establishes three fundamental propositions. A, or one, an omnipresent, eternal, boundless, immutable principle on which all speculation is impossible, since it transcends the power of human conception and can only be dwarfed by any human expression or similitude. It is beyond the range and reach of thought, in the words of Manduka, unthinkable and unspeakable. To render these ideas clearer to the general reader, let him set out with postulate there is one absolute reality which antecedes all manifested conditioned being. This infinite eternal cause, dimly formulated in the unconscious and the unknowable of current European philosophy, is the rootless root of all that was, is, or ever will be, is of course divide of all attributes, and it is essentially without any relation to manifested finite being. It is beingness rather than being, and it is beyond all thought or speculation. And then I'm going to go to the next one. And sometimes we consider that as space, is a one way to think about it, because if you for anything to manifest, there has to be a space for it to manifest in. And if everything that was visible and invisible disappeared, what would be left would still be space. So for our kind of thinking, that's one way to kind of get around the idea. The next one is on page 16, and it says, the eternity of the universe in toto as a boundless plane, periodically the playground of numberless universes, incessantly manifesting and disappearing, called the manifesting stars and the sparks of eternity. The eternity of the pilgrim is like a wink in the eye of self-existence, and that's from the book of John. The appearance and disappearance of worlds is like a regular ebb and flow, ebb and flux and reflux. This second assertion of the secret doctrine is the absolute universality of that law of periodicity, flux and reflux, ebb and flow, which physical science has observed and recorded in all departments of nature. An alteration such as that of day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking, is a fact so common, so perfectly universal, without exception, that it is easy to comprehend. And in it, we see the absolute fundamental laws of the universe. So this second one, sometimes we call some cycles, or we call, say, everything manifests under law. There's a law for everything, even if we don't know it, there is a law that we have the potential to know. And then the third fundamental, the fundamental identity, or the third, fundamental principle, the fundamental identity of all souls with the oversoul, the latter being itself an aspect of the unknown root, and the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul, a spark of the former, through the cycle of incarnations or necessity, in accordance with psychic and karmic law, during the whole term. In other words, no purely spiritual Buddhi or divine soul can have an independent, conscious existence before the spark which issued from the pure essence of the universal sixth principle, or the oversoul, has A, passed through every elemental form of the phenomenal world of that manvantra, and B, acquired individuality first by natural impulse, and then by self-induced and self-devised efforts, checked by its karma, thus ascending through all the degrees of intelligence, from the lowest to the highest manas or mind, from mineral and plant up to the holiest archangel, Dhyani Buddha. The pivotal doctrine of the esoteric philosophy admits no special privileges or gifts in man, save those won by his own ego through personal effort and merit throughout a long series of metempsychoses and reincarnations. So those ideas give her basis of setting out all these different articles that she's written to explain states of consciousness, phenomenon, elementals, elementaries, all that kind of stuff.
And sometimes the last one is as a title, we just say evolution, but not the evolution that we know normally, as the Darwinian evolution, but this would be something that evolves within men or within humanity, something that changes through all the reincarnations, because every time we reincarnate, whatever causes we set up in that life, or whatever effects, we're picking up, which we turn into causes, there will be sort of like a store, in something, it might be a vehicle, sometimes it's called Karana Sarira, which is always there with all the scandals that you were saying for the next rebirth. So that would be, this is what evolution is referring to, rather than changing of the form or men, or we coming from the apes. It has nothing to do with that. And the second one, as you mentioned, the law of cycles of karma and reincarnation, which is talked about as a proposition. And the interesting thing is that these are called propositions. It's not something that is imposed, that this is it. But it's proposing, the term is saying, we're proposing this. And these are the propositions of the theosophy, which really makes sense, because first is the idea of this universal, immutable principle, that anything we say is not gonna describe it fully. We can talk about it and we can think about it, but we won't be able to pin it. That way we cannot become dogmatic, because you cannot say, this is it, this is like this, or like that, or like that. And that's why you say here that, in a way, it's unthinkable and unspeakable. So of course, we can imagine something, and somebody might say, well, if it's something that you imagine, then it's not real. Well, in theosophy, is the opposite. What we think as real, as of real, is really not real, because it's in constant change. The idea of illusion, Maya. Maya, because it keeps changing, it's always changing. Even our thoughts are changing. Even whatever we think always changes. And also the second proposition that has to do with karma and reincarnation is about also thoughts and ideas. Because thoughts and ideas sort of like reincarnate. We keep them alive with the way we live, our character, and how we are born. We bring that again, we give them life again. So it's not only the form that we bring back, but it's the ideas, whether it be mental, psychic, passions, emotions, all of that reincarnates. We make it, we revive it every time we take up on a body. So the three propositions in the order that they are given also help us a lot, because first you have this immutable principle that whatever you say is not exactly it, but at least we have something which is the rootless root, or the root of everything. And the second one, karma and reincarnation, is the idea that it was brought up over here about like the night and day example as an analogy. In the day, there's activity. So the activity of the universe wakes up, but then there's a time that everything rests. And that's called the days and nights of Brahma. Night, Paraya and Manvantara. So activity and rest. And we have that analogy in everyday life. When we go to sleep, we wake up, activity. And of course, the third one, as I already mentioned, is the idea of, I guess, somehow working out all the causes that we set up in motion, and try to understand the philosophy and maybe change our lives.
And also the whole idea, like when we talk about the three objects of the Theosophical Society, the idea of brotherhood being the key one, the three propositions also establish that as a reality. We're all from one source. And we all manifest in cycles. So whenever there's a new galaxy, at some point in the future, that will be our new active field of consciousness. And everybody being from the same place is also connected to all these planes.
I kind of want to talk about evolution a little bit. The way you're talking about it, you're talking about cosmic evolution, or you're saying it's not like Darwin's evolution, right? So it's conscious evolution.
Yeah, we can do that. Conscious evolution.
So it seems to me that in a timeless space, karmically, there's all these causes and conditions from the lowest plane to the highest plane, but there's ability to like rupture through the different planes, especially for adepts. So at some point, evolution in this sense, in consciousness, should be happening at any moment, at any time, and can, right? Like, the reason I'm thinking this, because Colin mentioned that we're in a time right now where everyone's gonna go through this change, and they're gonna develop these powers, whether they like it or not, or these conscious psychic abilities. It seems like that's evolution.
Yeah.
So. It's just, I don't know what I'm trying to ask, like, it just seems like. If you will it. You have the ability, even by asking a conscious question, you just by asking the question, you're involved. So you have the ability to do, everyone has the ability when they're ready to ask the question.
Right. And everyone has the potential of these states of consciousness. That's the key thing. You know, in Theosophy, you guys have been going to lectures for a long time, a while. I don't know how long you guys have been going, but you know, the 7 principles is a key thing because she says the whole system is based on 7 principles. The lowest is the physical. Then we have the astral form, whether it's a rock, a tree, a human, a star. It has an astral matrix, which the physical is molded onto. It gravitates and forms around. That is animated by life force or prana. On this plane, on the inner planes, jiva. In many meditation books, many different Eastern religions talk about prana and jiva.
What's Fohad in relation to prana?
Okay, Fohad is many things, and that's the thing, like when you bring up a term about Fohad is cosmic electricity. It's also intelligence. It's also Kundalini.
Whoops.
It's magnetic force. It's magnetic force.
Shouldn't be the fruit.
You know, so you know, the scientists are, you know, they've been studying the sun for decades. You know, the first real experiments happened up in Mount Wilson with the old telescopes they have out there, where they really started studying the sun. Now we know that we have satellites that are affected by wind from the sun. Because why? Because the sun is emitting, we know the sun emits light waves and that's what makes plants grow. We know the sun emits cosmic waves, which too much will radiate our body and we'll develop cancers or we'll just burn up. But the sun also emits these other types of wave that the scientists are studying, and now they realize, okay, when this happens, we're gonna have to turn the satellites, otherwise it's gonna burn out all the satellites. In the same way that if you have a electronic appliance and you plug it into an outlet that's 350, it's gonna blow out your computer because the voltage is too high or the resonance is too high for that to handle. So Fohad is one of the things that it has, she gives so many different explanations about it, but understanding that it's electromagnetic force, but it's also intelligence. And so that's the thing, you could say, what is prana and what is jiva? And in a certain aspect, it's Fohad. What is cosmic radiation? It's Fohad. What is magnetic force? Well, it's Fohad at a very low voltage. What is static electricity? When you're going on carpet and you touch something else and you get a shock.
So prana is not personal then?
Prana is not personal. Prana is universal life energy.
Right, so it's just our ability to control our respiratory, for lack of, like, breathing, for example.
Yeah, breathing is a very crude aspect of prana.
Yeah.
Breathing is just, you know, the particular minerals that we need, oxygen that we need for our physical structure to maintain. But actually the prana is going to energize our astral form, which then we can either use really well or not really well. It's kind of interesting. HPV and Judge say, you don't fall asleep because you don't have prana. You fall asleep because your body can't resist the prana. And eventually it wears you out. Babies, you could be in a grocery store and people having an argument, and the baby is just asleep, and you say, oh, that baby's worn out. Baby's not worn out, it just has the ability to resist prana and sleep when it needs to sleep.
Doesn't resist prana, can't resist the outside.
No, it's
Force.
resisting the force.
You're awake, you're resisting the force.
There you go.
But when you're falling asleep, you can't resist that force.
And it's just like we get nervous energy. And you want to sleep, but you can't.
So then prana, and then what's the fourth one?
The fourth one is kama, or the desire nature. And it's not just a human nature. Kama is the whole natural world. So plants will gravitate towards the sunlight.
It sounds like that desire nature is the beginnings of evolution, right? Like it's like desiring, like
But that's the low aspect of it.
the
Like,
aspect of
Yeah,
conscious will.
yeah. Because it said the whole thing starts by absolute compassion and a need to create.
Kamadeva is the higher aspect.
Which be the fifth one?
Kamadeva would be the top one,
Oh, really?
basically. The fifth one is mind. But HPV breaks mind down into two aspects: lower mind, which is everyday mind, and higher mind, which you could think of as soul, consciousness, and memory. When we came in, you were talking about soul. HPV uses a lot of different ways to define soul, but soul is basically mind, and we have a reincarnating aspect of us that has accumulated mind, and then that manifests through lower mind, which we operate in most of our life. And then there's Buddhi, the sixth one, which is universal consciousness. And then the seventh is Atma, or the spirit behind everything.
You're saying that's what's the flip inversion of the fourth one of conscious will?
What we say personal is karma desire,
And
but
then
universal,
Kamadeva was the.
Kamadeva would be universal,
Universal aspect.
like the fourth universal aspect. And manas is above because karma has to be directed in each direction. So manas directs desire, whether it be personal or universal. Although universal, manas could be called mahat, universal mind. And if we go above Buddhi and Atma, that's spiritual.
Right.
So that, but the idea of prana, karma in ourselves being the fourth principle, in humanity or in men, and then universally will become a. That's the thing about the sevenfold constitution, is because sometimes we think that, everything is separated, but it's not. When something, let's say, unfolds, everything is there.
In one.
Right, potentially, everything is there in one. Once, of course, we can explain that the monad passes through all the kingdoms, elemental, mineral, vegetable and animal, and then man, it sounds like something linear, and it is linear to a point, but also it's non-linear. Everything is here, everything is present, but we're not aware or conscious of it. But then when we read those these ideas, the three fundamentals, it's in a way, at the end, it says that now the efforts have to be directed by ourselves. And therefore, all those kingdoms, the sevenfold principle of nature of man is here within me, in essence. So, and that's how we live. Even our body and all these principles belong to that nature, the sevenfold nature. But the idea of directing it, and the idea that it is the fourth, we count, enumerate the principles, come up in the fourth, also because we're in the fourth round. In the fourth round, what it seems to be more common is desire, personal desire.
Right. Which in a weird way, we're just training Kamadeva for later.
Yeah, well, Kamadeva, it's,
And I mean, there's the wrong way,
no,
but like symbolically.
we're training that we construct in a way.
You could think of Kamadeva as spiritual willpower. You could also think of it as the original cause for everything to manifest.
Okay, so if say someone is in a state of meditation. And they say they have a mantra, right? Like, would we consider that kama or would we consider that kamadeva?
You have to go into a state of meditation, you're starting from your personal self, right? And you're using your mind to control your awareness of external forces trying to just disrupt your meditation, maybe to start. So some people use a mantra or use incense or go to have a certain rhythm that they do, whatever that is. You could say your willpower to meditate is influencing your kama, your personal nature, to make a change. The higher nature has to work through the lower nature. And for you to reach that higher nature, you have to get control of your lower nature. So it's kind of like, it sounds like a conundrum in a sense, but really it's where are we starting with our most consciousness? Most of us is just daily consciousness. Once you're aware that there's other states of consciousness, you have to learn to be able to quiet that down and then listen for what comes from that higher state. Sometimes you don't even ask for it. Sometimes you get what people call an intuition. Something's happening in your life and all of a sudden it just an idea pops in your head. It's like, I shouldn't do that. I mean, it makes logical sense that I should do it, but something doesn't feel right. Now you have to figure out what is that something. And in some instances, that's your higher nature trying to register to your lower self to give you a warning. Some people get that in dreams. So that's kind of, I think it's a good question you brought up, like what is in meditation, where are you? That's what HPV is trying to explain in the Voice of the Science. In meditation, you're going to go through stages. And this is what this stage looks like. If you're in the astral light, you're going to see some pretty amazing things. But you have to realize there's a plane higher than that that's a reality. Because you're going to see a wider spectrum of what might be going on. You're going to see some ideas that people aren't talking about or that you're not aware of.
Right.
Or you're going to see some historical event, either from your personal life or something else. Some people, that happens in a dream. They remember some fragments of dreams and they seem different than their normal dream. They remember some previous thing that looks like a lifetime, previous event that has some significance or gives them some kind of guidance to something that's going on in the daily life.
So in my past life, I was always naked at school for some reason. Is that a true?
Well, you didn't have to wear clothes back then.
Maybe, yeah.
Well, you're a
And
complete,
now I have the anxiousness of the
You were
times that were.
you're completely open back then.
Now.
Oh,
Barbara and Cheryl, I want to make sure we're not neglecting you guys. You have anything to add or questions?
No, I'm good. I'm really enjoying listening to everything. And I think there was something I was going to say at the beginning, but I don't remember what it was right now.
Well,
Yeah, I'm good too. I just enjoy hearing everything.
fantastic. Thank you.
Thanks.
I have one thing.
I know what I was going to say. I was going to talk about the labors of Hercules and the cleaning of the stables that he was doing, having to do with something that you were talking about at the beginning. That's something having to do with the developing of willpower, the stories of Hercules developing his willpower in the 12 stages. Do you read that one in Theosophy?
I mean, I've read it.
I haven't read it.
I've read the trials and the triumphs of Hercules, yeah. I mean, it's similar to the biblical tale too. I think it was Daniel that had to labor for 7 years for a wife, I believe. And it's something that in the past, there's been clear lesson of adepts having to sanctify or strengthen or cleanse, things like that to be able to, endeavor into these realms. I mean, I don't think me just trying to blast off to the astral plane is gonna work out very well.
And I think that's a good point that you bring out is all of these, stories were occult teachings that had to be clothed in a language that made sense during their time or to people, hundreds of years later. Because during certain times, it was dangerous to talk about that. So what do? You tell a story or a parable that carries the essence of the teaching. And if you can look at that and it makes you start wondering about life more than just what you see every day. I mean, we have movies now. Before they had books and stories, before there were books, there were people that would tell stories and they would convey these ideas. But if you study Theosophy for a little bit and then you look at the Star Wars movies and the main character is Luke Skywalker. In The Voice of the Silence, she talks about what a Skywalker is. He's able to tap into the Force, so he can feel when other things are happening. He can feel when someone gets killed. He can feel consciously and know that a world is being in turmoil. We all participate in that world, but we all don't have Yoda teaching us and schooling us how to do it. And that's what the books are about. The books are about understanding that the teacher that we're searching for, if they're not on the plane that we're at, then we have to use our own intuitional teacher, which is what the third fundamental says. We're all connected. And that connection is internal. If someone's a Christian, they can read in their own teachings and see that some of these teachings are similar, not all of them. But if you read Revelations and you weren't just going to a born again church where they're telling you, Russia's going to blow up the bomb and that's going to be Revelation. We're all going to come up we're going to be in our teenage bodies. You can see that is no different than the Mahabharata and talking about the war or the difficulties you'll go through when you're awakening states of meditation. And if you look at it from that perspective, then you'll see it in a different light, as opposed to the end of the world is coming.
And that's, me and James before class were talking about something like that that a lot of these tales, they have the higher teaching, they have the Hermetic, the occult teaching, and they have the teaching that kind of latches a lot of the masses latch onto, and that's even sometimes used for control. You know, there's plenty of Greeks back in the day that really thought Hercules was this guy, and rah, 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 let's have temples. And, but I mean, these tales, and to the philosophers, to Plato, was Hercules a real guy? Maybe, but it's this his symbol and his actions with way more important than a guy. Right. So yeah. What were you?
Oh, were you gonna say something?
Oh, no, go ahead. I think Chris and Roberta.
So Hercules and the 12 labors, right? It's possible that Hercules is the sun and the 12 labors are the astrological houses.
Oh, probably.
Yeah. So that could be what that's all about.
I mean, yeah.
I
Well, one of them has to do with the bull, a lion as well.
Yeah,
He has to fight a bull and a lion.
yeah. The whole thing could be an esoteric allegory
Probably is.
that you have to
Actually,
look deeper into. Yeah.
Wow.
I was the same thing, I was thinking about the 12 labors symbolizing Hercules, the sun, going through all the 12 signs of the
houses.
zodiac.
Yes.
Now, that could symbolize in us, because there's something in ourselves that symbolizes the inner sun. You know, that's why in some systems, you know, they idolize the sun, but not the external sun. You know, we only see, just like Colin was explaining the sevenfold constitution, you know, we only see the grossest, you know, side of it, the more objective. But there's always these other 6 inner planes in ourselves. So then the sun must have these inner planes. So the 7th part of the sun symbolizes our soul, to
Yes.
you know, our spirit. So maybe, you know, us going through all these initiations, maybe it could be 12 initiations that we have to go through. So we suffer, you know, in each labor to pass through that, so we can become like the sun or become the spirit that we were. So there's a lot of symbology.
That's what
So this is an Alice Bailey book. Now, is Alice Bailey part of Theosophy?
Alice Bailey was part of Theosophy after HPV left. Yeah. And then
Yes. That's his book. It's his book.
after HPV.
Yeah, The Labors of Hercules is his book.
Is Alice Bailey's?
Yes.
Oh, did not know that.
That's why I was bringing it up, because it was that particular labor that was the cleaning of the stables, which I think that we were talking about at the beginning. It just gave me that connection with that reading of that. But I just didn't know where Theosophy stood with Alice Bailey. I do have all I don't know, it has a woman's name, but I think this is a man, right? Alice Bailey?
No, I think
I
it was.
thought it was a lady, yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we just study here at ULT, we just study Judge and HPV and some of the other writings, the Theosophical Society in different branches. Some of them, yeah, still study Alice Bailey, and some study Leadbeater.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a couple people in ULT that would know a lot more about Alice Bailey than I do, yeah, but.
That's what I was trying to figure out, what this lodge was doing, because the one in Arizona here does more of the study of that. So I'm just trying to, but I, New York too, so I'm studying that in New York.
Yeah, I think the thing with us, it's pretty, like Colin said, the ULT is kind of tries to stay away from like
the later.
big personalities other than HPV, William Judge, and a fellow named Crosby.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's so many other valuable people in there. I mean, I really like a lot of what BP Wadia had to say a lot of the time, and there's great stuff out there. Even, I mean, Alcott, I mean, wow. The man was powerful, he was a powerful speaker. So yeah, there's, I mean, and arguably, there's Rudolf Steiner people. I mean, theosophical thought is far wider than just the ULT, you know, so.
Okay, I just wanted to know what you know, because I'm new to the group here and I'm wondering what, you know, what you guys talk about and study. And I do have all those books. I just don't have it with me now. So I'm glad you put it on the screen for me.
But yeah, well, I'll try to do more of that, but yeah, usually, yeah, we stick pretty close to HPB and Judge.
The original writings from the
Yeah.
very beginning.
Which actually Gurdjieff stuck to too, when he writes his book about that, about Theosophy. There were a lot of theosophical people that went with Gurdjieff, and I see that there's a lot of ideas very similar.
Oh, absolutely.
Chris, you were gonna say something? No?
Well, one of the things I was gonna say is that, you know, when it's said that when you study the secret doctrine, and I would add, you know, the Voice of the Silence, and some other books too, it's a way that, you know, we develop our intuition. So like has been said with meditation or focusing on these ideas, like how, you know, that's occultism. How, when you read these books, what's going on underneath inside that's developing your intuition just by reading these books. And that's what you know, partially what occultism is. You're focusing your mind, you're not thinking about your, you know, your everyday thoughts, your wants, desires. You're focusing your mind on these teachings, which are universal and, you know, get you to think other than just yourself. You know, you're introspective, but you're not thinking about your personality. You're thinking about these other things. And then your intuition, you know, starts to develop.
Yeah, I think it's the secret doctrine. I mean, there's a reason we have the pamphlet and there's entire courses on how to approach the secret doctrine, where to start, page 200 being this kind of anchor point, you know, and like, because I don't know, when I read about the history of Theosophy, I almost feel like I love the beautiful flaws of the secret doctrine, but there are some parts where I really feel like she was just trying to get all that out. And so maybe given another 30 years of life, she would have, you know, structured it more, you know, and things like that. But I mean, for how quick she put out these, she was going, and there was something that she was headed for. And if she had a better idea of her timeline, probably, you know, or she had masters who were like, hey, you got about 3 years to get this out, or so that's why I think that's so important, is like there was so much intuition, I think, that went into the writing that just like reading it, yeah, I can't imagine. I love her writing, and I love reading Isis's. You can just read it as almost a study, and it's great and it's entertaining. But Secret Doctrine, I can't imagine entire parts like where I'm not trying to think about what the words relate to, or even the order of the words, instead of just what, you know, this sweatborn race that was barely physical, you know, like, why do I need to know this? Yeah.
Well, that's a good question. Why she lays it out and why it's good to know is because that was part of our existence. When she talks about that, that's when we were existing only in the Akashic world. There was no solid bodies. There was no need for a solid body. And that you still have. You know, we are so used to physical existence, unless someone has some, you know, unusual experience where they actually consciously jump out of their body and have that experience, and then they're aware that, oh, wait a minute, I'm there, but I'm here, and you're not in a dream. Then you start searching, or you think, well, if I'm not in there, then what am I in? Am I just a cloud of consciousness? How can I be witnessing these two things at the same time?
Yeah, if I don't have eyes, I've never seen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's the thing, and you know, you don't, just basic things that we go through, people don't question. a lot of times dreams. Well, how do you see and hear in dreams? You're asleep. And your eyes are closed. And maybe the dog is barking, so, you know, that's registering on your brain, but you're not aware of it. But you're having a whole experience, and that's a state of consciousness. So if you can do that, then these meditative states of consciousness must be real. Or people are just writing stories, but either way, you try it out and see, can I reach that state? What is it? Why are there different kinds of dreams? Why do you have dreams and you can say, oh yeah, I shouldn't have watched that movie last night because all I did was not get good sleep and had crazy dreams. But sometimes you have a dream and it's so different from those kind of dreams, it makes you think about, well, where did that come from? It seems like there's a message, I can't figure it out. Why was everybody in my dream had a different, they were all look different, but I know that was that person that from work and that was the person over there in school. Why do you have dreams where they're like actors playing a part, but you know all the actors behind the part?
Or you are all the actors.
Or you are all the actors.
I'm going to ask Chris to read this one. I don't know to read the-
Or dreams within dreams, like.
Oh, those are crazy.
This one explain what we're talking about a little bit more deeply.
It says, this is from the Theosophical movement.
It doesn't-
The Theosophical teachings were defined by
Yes.
Madame Blavatsky as constituting, in essence, a synthesis of working principles. By learning to use these principles, she said, any man can gain independent knowledge of the laws of nature and the underlying realities of human experience. This proposition she founded on the actual existence of men whose lives reveal a mastery of the use of those principles. Such men, Madame Blavatsky said, were her teachers, but while Theosophy was thus identified by its 19th century expositor, inquirers were repeatedly warned against accepting its teachings on faith. The Theosophical movement sought no credulous devotees, but serious students.
Yeah, they give you a little kid about what we're talking about. Because we need to learn what is that seventh principle. If we don't know, we're talking about all our life. We have to learn a little by little, but we have to have a time to understand ourselves.
Yeah. Let me read something, since we were supposed to be talking about conversations on occultism. I mean, I walked in here late, I had no idea what you guys. I just want to. I'm gonna read two things. One is, there's an article called Occult Vibrations.
Oh, yeah, it's in the
It's in the
second
pamphlet,
one.
Yeah.
Volume 2.
and it's, you know, it's part of the conversations on occultism. Let me just see where she explains it here. So. This is Judge asking the question. In reading the article, Aum, A-U-M, in the Path of April 1886, this idea was again suggested. And he's stating the idea that she had mentioned. The divine resonance spoken of is not the divine light itself. Resonance is only the outbreathing of the first sound of the entire Aum or Om. It manifests itself only as the power which stirs up and animates the particles of the universe, but also in the evolution and dissolution of man, of the animal and mineral kingdoms, and the solar system. Among the Aryans, it was represented by the planet Mercury, who has always been said to govern the intellectual faculties and be the universal stimulator. What of this? And HPV's answer. Mercury was always known as the god of secret wisdom. He is Hermes as well as Buddha, the son of Soma. Speaking of matters on the lower plane, I would call the divine resonance you read in the path vibrations. And the originator of that, which gives impulse to every kind of phenomena on the astral plane. And then his question again, the differences found in human brains and natures then must have their root in different vibrations? Most assuredly. Human beings in general are like so many keys on the piano, each having its own sound, and the combination of which produces other sounds in endless variety. Like inanimate nature, they have a keynote from which all the varieties of character and constitution proceed by endless changes. Remember what is said in Isis Unveiled, page 16, volume 1, quote, the universe is a combination of 1,000 elements, yet the expression of a single spirit, a chaos to the senses, physical, and a cosmos to the reason, manus. So how far, so far, how this generally applies to nature, does it explain the difference between the adept and an ordinary man? HBB says, yes, the difference is that an adept may be compared to that one key which contains all the keys in the great harmony of nature. He has a synthesis of all keys in his thoughts, whereas ordinary man has the same key as a basis, but only acts and thinks on one or a few of the changes of this great key, producing with his brain only a few chords out of the whole great possible harmony.
Resonance, interesting word.
Yeah.
Well, it's just, it sounds like people trying to grasp string theory right now. Like, it's pretty wild, just the conversation. Like, they shouldn't have known about any of that stuff. It's, yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, Chris brought up the idea of a mudra, or some people, a mantra, or a mudra, a hand form, or a mantra, which is a tone. But the important thing that she always stresses is not just saying the right tone, it's your state of mind when you say the right tone. So if you're trying to meditate, you're increasing the power, or you're increasing the voltage of that tone that you're using by the thought that you're giving it. And in other articles, she said the same thing. She said, if you were to get a talisman from an adept, the adept is endowing that talisman with power, but your mind working with that talisman in the right way will magnify that power. But if you use it in the wrong way, it's going to magnify it and have a detrimental effect on yourself. So she was really trying to always influence the effect that our minds have on anything that we do. So if you use it with right intention, a tone that you use can really assist you in meditation.
And it's interesting as far as mantras, it's the original kind of true meaning of using the Lord's name in vain. It wasn't a sin by just saying it. It was because this is a word of power, and by just being blah, 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 that's in vain. You're not, you're not saying it as a proper spell or mantra, or, it just be like, yeah, it's these things have power. It's even like almost like similar to some modern swear words and things like that. It's like you can say them in vain and they don't seem as harmful and they're casual, but when someone swears with resolve, it's definitely not in vain and it has a different power. So
It's like prayers.
exactly, it's like the opposite of,
And you're just repeating it, or you're really thinking about that, and
Right.
and you might get results, but by repeating,
Right, it's like these prayers where you're just going through the motion or to be seen by your neighbor that to make sure that you're praying, that's in vain. There's nothing there. But another thing too is, I mean, have to always remember that prayer was once synonymous with meditation. It's not just begging some kind of external force for something. It's trying to commune with it. It's trying to be one with it. That's much more meditation than prayer, I think, in modern terms.
And so you have to know how to direct that prayer.
Right.
It's not only the singing or the mantra, but what is in your mind. So the more you know, and of course, it's not just intellectual, but the more you know, or the better you can direct that sound, because that sound is gonna resonate. You know, all those questions and answers were about resonance. I mean, what is a sound and what is resonance? I mean, you can produce a sound and then it's gonna have resonance among all of you. It's like you're expressing an idea, maybe in a form of a sound, it's going to resonate, but each one of you is going to welcome it in a different perspective according to your nature. It might resonate in different ways for everyone. So it's the idea of the person that is doing the mantra or the praying and all that, how to direct, how to know how to direct that those forces.
Mhm. Yeah, it's I mean, in what we were talking about earlier, where it's saying opening ourselves up to some things, there's also that, like the prayer without an intent, a prayer in vain that you just heard repeated or saw in some book, that can be open-ended, and there's can be some elementals flying around and getting some impressions from that. And you know, when I'm doing the Lord's Prayer, talking about deliver me from sin and all this kind of heavy stuff I don't really get. I don't know if you know, if you really want to be messing with stuff like that, it's a similar thing. Because like, why is this guy I'm praying to? Why do I have to ask him to not lead me in temptation? Why is that even a possibility? Why is it even on the table? Okay.
Well, I think even that prayer, if you took the idea of who or what you're praying to,
Mhm.
because HPB associates the higher self with Christo or Buddha or Vishnu. So that's the thing. It's like you just have to, if you try not going external and try going internal, and know that all those states or those beings are within you, or you have a link there, then you're kind of protecting yourself. When you're trying to go outside, that you're opening yourself up to influences that aren't already innate in you. And that's kind of we could say that's kind of our force field, our shield, to protect us from external influences. Having a desire to benefit humanity and trying to find that Buddha within, because the voice of silence says, you know, the Buddha is within you. So Jesus even said, you don't find God in a church.
Oh, yeah.
So they built churches to establish that, no, we have him right here.
And with the sword to
Yeah.
break them down.
So that's the thing. You were gonna say something?
Yeah, so this will is almost, this magical will is powerful. It's not that you're protecting yourself, if you choose to pray dark, let's say, versus pray with good intention, you're opening it's the same function, it's just one's.
It's the same function, it just depends on what you're trying to listen to.
Right, so you're gonna get an answer depending on what your intention.
Yeah, it's like all of spiritualism. Ouija board, I mean.
And then, so, I don't know, this last passage you read, I feel like I got lost, but then I found a few things. But the musical part sort of was resonating with me, and then I turned and I looked at that, right? But like finding it's like you're tuning the mantra, it's like tuning your guitar so that it sounds right. For the right intention, right? Versus like having dark thoughts and then you're playing it out of tune. in a way. But I think it's interesting
It's
that.
gonna have a different effect.
But there's a tuning there that's part of nature that sounds right. And I think that's mystical and fascinating. Like why is this sound right versus not?
Like Om is a really strong, powerful.
Yeah. I
It's
always-
very general.
I had heard a long, long time ago, and I don't know where this comes from, but it always sounded right to me very early in my studies, is that Om or Ah, and then the stopping of Ah will be Om, is the truest name of God we can utter, because it's the most natural sound we can utter. It's the, without moving your tongue, flexing your lips or anything, it's just Ah, Ah. And so it's like, that always really made sense to me. I'm like, oh, that's the unaltered just sound you make.
I think that that sound is the 440 that they tune their instruments to. Because if you go onto the internet and you push 440 and you ask to listen to it, you can actually hear that tone, and it sounds very similar to how you tune your instrument. So I felt very close to that idea of that's what we're doing. We're tuning to the universal, whatever it is, universal being or whatever. I do feel that.
And maybe someone knows more about this, about space than me, but I think I heard too that like astronomers were still like super confused because there's like a constant note of like B sharp coming from a black hole or something like that. It's been coming for like billions of years.
There's two black holes that like crashed into each other and they made a sound that we received like not that long ago.
Well, if you go by what HPV is saying in these different articles, she said sound is just the fabric of the universe.
Is something else is being
Everything
created
is
like
vibration. That's what she talks about,
pre-embryo?
vibration, everything is vibration.
Right, the architecture.
Sound is a certain spectrum of vibration, light is a certain spectrum of vibration.
Yeah.
Magnetism is a certain spectrum of vibration, everything is vibration. It's just being able to attune and understand what that is.
Right, just like when you read a book and read words silently, you're hearing the words in your head.
Oh, yeah. Like figuring out how to read faster than you're reading, like that's a funny thing too. A lot of people, like, I didn't notice for years and years and years that I read faster than I spoke, but a lot of people only read at the speed their internal voice is repeating.
Right.
And like, it's really interesting, but at the same time, if I read something out loud, I usually get a better understanding just by reinforcing it, by saying it almost. Yeah, that's sound. I think language is so valuable and so important.
Wrap up?
Yeah, probably. Barbara and Cheryl, thanks for joining us. You guys have any closing thoughts?
Thank you very much. Well, I just wanted to say that
Thanks.
these things that you're talking about, magnetism and vibrations and so forth, I think that we need to use them in our work on ourselves on how to use them to develop. I think that help us develop these skills, but not black skills, but white skills in order to develop our soul to help others. Okay, so yes, thank you very much. It's been great, and thank you for inviting me to this. I'm really.
Yeah, thank you.
It was very good contribution.
Have a great week, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Thank you too. Good night.
Yep.